Hey everybody, today I'm going to tell you about the number one mistake that junior UX designers are making in their job interviews. This mostly applies to any sort of interview where you're showing your work. It could be a portfolio presentation, a whiteboarding challenge, presenting a take-home design challenge, things like this. I'll tell you what the problem is, I'll give you the solution, and then I'm going to give you an example of how I'm doing this in my own job interviews by showing you a portfolio presentation that I just made. The mistake is many designers are not clearly stating what the problem is that their design is going to solve, and then when they're presenting their design, they aren't clearly stating why this design is a solution to the problem that they were solving in the first place. I think it's very important to understand why we need to get this part of the interview right. So the primary reason that a company is going to hire a UX designer is to help them solve some sort of problem that already exists in their product or already exists in their users' lives that the product can help solve. So you need to make them feel confident that you're capable of solving this problem by showing how you've done this in the past. Many junior designers will present work and tell the interviewer things like the goals of the design, user personas, the whole design process, show low and high fidelity versions of the design. But what they really need to be doing is adding in a very clear problem statement when they're presenting their work. So the problem statement should include things like what the problem is, how we know it's a problem, and why this problem is worth solving. Towards the end of your presentations, when you're showing the solution that you came up with, you need to clearly say whether or not this design was a solution to the problem that you had defined in the beginning. Ideally, you would do this by providing a well thought out rationale and also backing this up with real world data that shows why it worked or didn't. You don't always need data though. If you didn't collect it or it's just a concept project, you can just provide the rationale. It's also important to note that it's okay to say that your design did not solve the problem. If you say exactly why it didn't solve the problem and what you would do differently in the future to make that design work, that can also show some great design expertise. Now let's jump into one of my case study presentations so you can get an example of how I do this. All right, so here we have a presentation that I just made for some of my job interviews that I'm doing now. So this is a case study for some of the work that I did at City. I was working on a product called City Builder, and this case study specifically focuses on the search features. So I'll spare you some of the context about like what this project was about, why we're working on it, things like this. And I'll go right to these slides towards the beginning where I'm talking about the problem, and I'll show you how I'm doing this. So first, what I'm doing is I'm saying who the users are, and I'm talking about how they are investors focused on what we call a double bottom line investment opportunity. So essentially, they want to help communities while making a profit and receiving tax incentives. So this is what they want. And then their problems are finding projects that fit this double bottom line criteria. So it'll often take them months of research to find good opportunities. And before City Builder, there was no other platform that can help them in this research process. So here I'm showing these are the reasons why this is like a big problem worth solving. And then I talk about how they solved these problems in the past. So they would hire data collection companies that will help them find information to facilitate these decisions. And this data can cost tens of thousands of dollars. And besides that, they were just using other like publicly available sources. So I talk about the problem from this angle, and then later on in this presentation, I also come at the problem from a different angle. I talk about how we had an MVP, which stands for minimum viable product, essentially the first version of a product, so that this was made, and there was a search feature that existed in this MVP, but there were some big problems with it that we wanted to solve in this redesign, which is essentially what this whole case study is about. So on this slide, I talk about how the MVP had a search feature and the users had to type in exact key terms to receive a result. And our research team had discovered that nobody knew how to use it. So now at the beginning, I'm talking about how there's these two problems. The users want to find these investment opportunities. They don't have a good way of doing it. And so search, the whole thing this case study is about, would be one of the main ways that the users would um, find these investment opportunities in our product. But the search feature on the MVP was essentially broken and nobody knew how to use it. So we're creating a lot of importance for this whole search feature and building up to the solution, which I'm going to show in just a second here. All right, so I skipped over some slides and I went right to the design solution part. So this is the design that I ended up handing off and what it ended up looking like in the product. So I'm going to talk about like how I'm going to say like whether or not this solved the problem or not. So I'm going to argue that it did solve the problem, and it made it much easier to search through the product and find these investment opportunities. So now with this search, the user can do things like type in a location that they want to invest in, and they're going to get this search dropdown that shows all sorts of different options that they might be interested in when they're looking for an investment opportunity. So they can find different locations that might be in need of a new project. They can find existing projects that they might want to get involved in. They might find different funds or entities that that could help them, all right here in this central search dropdown. And then it also solves some of the problems that existed in the MVP, because now a user can type and they can get auto complete or auto suggested results as they're typing. So they don't need to know exactly what to search for. Now this search bar will help them in that process. And they can also click on the See All Results button at the bottom and get an expanded version of this in a separate search results page. So that's just a little kind of glimpse into how I would talk about this. I would also talk more about like the UX decisions that were made with this, but I'll save that kind of thing for another video. And then later I would also talk about some of the things like animations that were designed and how I designed this for different breakpoints. But I think it's really just important here to focus on how I'm talking about how this solves the problems that we had talked about previously. So I hope that is helpful, and I hope that you can do something similar to this in your own case studies or in whatever kind of work that you're presenting in interviews. So thank you very much for watching.